What a great energy. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Congratulations, Chandru and the family, right? Because you transform, you're able to create that influence across you, right? And thanks to Yogi for inspiring many such families. What an amazing story that we heard so far, right? So let's start. I have a few slides to share. Let me share my screen and let me start with few questions, right? If you can answer me, right? Do you feel tired even after sleeping for 7, 8 hours? Or do you know somebody who slept whole day but still yawning and feel still groggy, right? If you can message, if it's you, yes. Or if it is somebody who is that, maybe yes, my husband, maybe your friend, whoever, right? If you can message, right? Let's make it interactive. Yeah, I would like to see the messages coming in. All right, okay. Husband, okay. All right, you can pass on some tips, right, from this session, right? If your husband is not here, right? All right, how about this? Do you often need coffee, tea with sugar, or energy drink just to get through your day? When you feel like drinking, maybe you can mention. If it is yes, how many cups of coffee or tea or energy drink that you take? If you can message, how many cups, or do you really need it, right? You'll have an answer for these two questions, so probably a few more, right? Black coffee, 2 cups, okay. Okay, what else? Anybody who needs energy drink just to get through the day? All right, so that's the whole objective of today's session. Let's address the hidden energy leakages that are happening inside our body, right? So why do we need energy, right? If you look at our body has multiple organs, right? So all of them working non-stop, 24 by 7. And if you look at the percentage of energy consumption, right, between brain, liver, muscle, and heart, it's almost 70 to 80%, right? They're vital organs, right? And even though if you are sleeping throughout the day, right, you still need energy because these organs has to work. That's what we call resting metabolism, right? BMR, right? Now let's understand, where does this energy come from, right? Our body has multiple organs, right? And the basic element of each of these organs is a cell, right? In fact, we have 37 trillion cells. So 10 to the power of 12, you have to put 12 zeros in front of 37 to count the number of cells that we have. And each of these cell have a tiny power stations, right? They're called mitochondria. If it is one, it's called mitochondrion. If there is multiple, in fact, each cell will have many, right? Here you can see only 3. There are many mitochondria that can exist in each of our cells, right? So these tiny power stations, right, are the one which is supplying that energy, supplying that power, right, to each of these cells to survive and thrive, right? So let's dig deeper, right? Can you make a wild guess on how many mitochondria exist inside these cells, right? So we have brain consuming almost 22% of the energy that body needs, right? How many, if you can make a wild guess? If you can just type the number, right? You just saw 3, right? What could be your wild guess? How many mitochondria can exist inside a brain cell? Similarly, a egg cell, which is the starting point of life, and inside a heart cell. Any wild guess? In fact, if you look at the 20% of the daily energy need, you know, to meet that need, 10,000 mitochondria, right? And we have 86 billion neurons inside our brain. And our brain is highly intensive consumer of the energy of our daily need, right? Our life starts with the egg cell and the female egg, right? And it is responsible for creating that life. And this is highly dense in terms of mitochondria. 600,000, because it has to support the new life. The heart, which works non-stop, it beats more than 1 lakh times a day, has 8,000 mitochondria inside one cell. That means we have approximately 2 to 3 billion heart muscle cells, right? If you can count all this together, that's how it becomes quadrillion, right? That's the huge number. So a little bit of history of how this mitochondria came inside us. It was in fact a bacteria, right? Long ago, 2 billion years ago, right? Ancestor human cell was not involved with mitochondria. Over a period of time, it engulfed a mitochondria, and mitochondria became a part of a cell, right? And this symbiotic relationship existed for many years because mitochondria was producing energy which was required for the cell, and it survived. And it is like it is a tenant and paying a rent for the owner of the cell, just producing the energy. That's a little bit of history, right? Now, how does this energy come from, right? So, where do we get this energy? We all consume food, right? There are macros and micros. So, if you look at macros, we consume carbohydrate, protein, fats, right? So these are eventually broken down, right? It's a complex process. I don't want to get into too much of complexity. This is a simplistic diagram that I can put together, right? So eventually, whenever we eat carbohydrate, it gets broken down into glucose molecule. It is the primary fuel for our body. The majority of the energy need is met from this primary fuel, right? And we have protein. Eventually, it's broken down into amino acids, right? And our cell cannot directly use amino acid. It goes through a process called gluconeogenesis to convert those amino acids into glucose. And we also consume fats. And our body directly can consume fats and in fact convert into energy as well. But it's a secondary source. If the glucose is available, it always relies on glucose to produce energy. And if you have surplus, let's say you consumed a heavy meal, and if it is surplus, the body is so smartly designed, anything in excess, it puts it into a storage. There are two storages in our body. One is called glycogen, right? Where excess of carbohydrate, whenever it is, it could be excess of protein as well, it gets stored in glycogen. Glycogen is all across the body, majority is held in liver. Likewise, if the glycogen is full, our body also goes through a process called lipogenesis, which basically converts your glucose into your body fat once the glycogen is full. Glycogen has a limited capacity. It's like a small bucket in your bathroom. And your fat storage can be a huge overhead tank. That's where the fat reserves are. So our body always try to switch between these two energy sources. If the glucose is there, it consumes. If the glucose is not there, then it looks for glycogen. The glycogen is not there, then it will start tapping into your fat reserves, right? So our human cell take this fuel and converts into energy currency called ATP. That's how we get energy, right? ATP is a basic currency which is produced by mitochondria. That's what keeps our cell alive, right? I'd like to show a demonstration. So we have a 3.5-year-old daughter. She uses this toy, right? If you look at, there are batteries here. If you can see this, right? There are 3 batteries inside. Just visualize these batteries are like a mitochondria, right? So if they're active, this toy starts working, right? If there is any deficiency with the battery, I mean, assuming if it is rechargeable, right? If the battery drains out, the toy will not work, right? So just imagine that your mitochondria, right, in the similar way, right? Whatever I'm going to cover, right? You have to just imagine your battery, if it is drained out, if your battery is totally, I mean, unusable, what will happen to the toy? The toy has no use. Similarly, your cell has no use. Just imagine, right? We talked about billions and millions and quadrillion numbers, right? Just imagine the same thing happening in your body, right? That is how we get into a disease state, right? So now, what factors impacts the efficiency of energy production in mitochondria? Why there is a leakage? Why the leakage happens even though we are eating food? Why we are not getting enough energy to handle things in our life, right? So let's discuss. So we discussed about this, right? Human body, there are trillions of cells and quadrillion mitochondria. The food that we eat gets converted into energy, right? When there is any damage caused to the mitochondria, it could be a lot of factors. There are a lot of lifestyle factors. Aging is one of the factor. We go through a lot of diseases. If you're going through extreme sports, drug abuse, toxins, free radical damage, those factors can in fact impact your mitochondria and create a damage. And that is what triggers a state of disease, right? It's a vicious cycle, right? The factors that leads, right? Your lifestyle factors that leads you into a metabolic instability. You start feeling low in energy, right? Maybe that's the starting point of you started gaining weight and started getting into lifestyle diseases like diabetes and other blood pressure and whatnot, right? And eventually that in fact damages your mitochondria as well. And this is a vicious cycle, right? It keeps going on and on and on. That's where your vitality starts reducing, right? One of the another factor that impacts your mitochondrial health and the efficiency of energy production is our eating habits, right? If you look at, if I take you back to our ancestor days, right? In fact, to take you back to your grandparents, they only consume 3 meals a day, maybe morning breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes only 2 meals as well, right? If you look at in last couple of decades, because of westernization, the too much of snacking being added, right? Between the meals, we consume too many things. When things become so accessible, you just open the food, open the fridge, there's something to eat. And we tend to munch a lot. So when you're munching quite frequently between the meals, right? Insulin, which is responsible for opening the door of your cell so that mitochondria can take this food and provide you energy, develops a resistance. Your door remains closed because there is too much of food coming in which mitochondria cannot handle. It's signaling to your cell, boss, enough, close the door, I'm full, right? And your cell is not opening the doors. Even though you have food coming in, if your body is becoming insulin resistant because of quite frequent insulin spikes that are happening in your body, mitochondria eventually feel deficient. When you're not supplying enough food to the mitochondria, it cannot produce energy, and the cell will also have a natural death, right? And eventually, all this glucose that is not getting inside the cell will accumulate in glycogen and your fat storage. That's how you start gaining weight, right? That is the starting point. I mean, insulin resistance is a root cause for most of the metabolic disorders that we have come across, right? So these metabolic disorders or diseases like obesity, type 2 diabetes will actually start impacting mitochondria. That's how the dysfunction starts happening. Mitochondria is supposed to produce energy, and because of these metabolic diseases, it will not start working properly. It will have goes through oxidative stress. It is supposed to produce ATP to provide energy. There is a reduction or production of ATP, right? And also starts impacting the genetic expression. It cannot duplicate itself, right? In fact, mitochondria also goes through a duplication within the cell to produce more mitochondria. The moment there's a dysfunction, it cannot reproduce itself, and that's where we see a death happening, right? So now how to improve the efficiency of energy production in our mitochondria and stop this energy leakage, right? So if you look at male and female, right, have a different needs for energy, right? I've just given a chart based on your age bracket, assuming most of you are in this 30 to 50 range, right? So approximately a female would need 2000 to 2500 calories, depending on how active you are. You're more active, you would need more energy, right? Similarly, male would require somewhere around 2500 to 3000 calories, depending on how active you are. If you're sedentary, you would need very less, right? Now we talked about 3 macros: carbohydrate, fat, and protein, right? If you look at the chart below, 1 gram of each macro, right? If you look at carbohydrate and protein produce the same energy calories, right? 4 kilocalories. Whereas fat is a little higher, right? So when you're eating any meal, it's very important to balance, not eating only carbohydrate, not eating only fat, not eating only proteins. You have to mix of all, and that's how it becomes a complete meal. but how you eat matters more, right? That's how our programs are so designed to customize you, to help you understand what portion of these macros that you have to consume and why we have to consume, right? So that's interesting to understand. So your mitochondria also needs some catalyst, right? To produce the energy by taking the raw material of macros, it needs these vitamins and minerals. If you are deficient of any of these, which is not being given through your diet, your mitochondria will not be able to work with efficiency. Specifically, if I look at coenzyme Q10, as we age, enter into 40s and 50s, our coenzyme Q10 levels deplete. It is naturally produced in the body, but it will deplete as we age. And if you are not taking it in any external form, there's always be a deficiency, and it affects the efficiency of running your mitochondria at its top notch, right? Similarly, there are other vitamins and minerals that mitochondria needs that we have to provide, which acts as a catalyst. Even though it is required in microgram, it makes a big difference, right? So in fact, a mitochondria duplicates itself, right? But we have to provide that environment. There's a process called biogenesis, right? Where your mitochondria can increase its number. In fact, the density in your cell, right? The mitochondrial density in your cell can be increased, provided you follow certain lifestyle changes. One of the first lifestyle changes that we recommend to increase the density of your mitochondria is to follow intermittent fasting, right? We talk about autophagy. There's something similar called mitophagy, which will help you to clean up the old mitochondria and build new as well. Intermittent fasting is a great benefactor which can help you increase the mitochondria. That effectively means, right, the more power plants giving you more energy, right? And strength and HIIT workout has been proven to increase the density of your mitochondria in your cells. The more muscles you build, right, the more mitochondrial density that you're going to have, and that effectively increases your resting metabolism, that effectively increases your vitality, and also helps in duplicating your more mitochondria. It can help you give more energy. In fact, a lot of people complain about when I work out, I feel tired. In fact, you should keep trying longer enough to get more energy because of the workout that you do for a longer period of time, right? If you look at this is the impact when I talk about endurance training. So both strength training and HIIT together, it can be an endurance training. When there is no endurance training involved, if you look at the density of mitochondria, right, it will be very less. When there is endurance training happening quite frequently, the mitochondrial density increases. That's how people who are consistently working out, they'll always have energy to do more in their life, right? As we age, one thing that we have to take care is aging gracefully, right? So you have to ensure mitochondrial fitness, right? See, there is something called as muscle atrophy or sarcopenia. I mean, if you observe people who age probably in their 60s and 70s and 80s, they look very thin because they lose a lot of muscle mass. That's what is muscle atrophy all about, right? If you're in your 40s and 50s, you have to do the strength training now to make sure your 60s and 70s have good amount of mitochondria and the muscle mass to age gracefully. That's how the strength training plays a significant role. As you're aging, if you're not protecting your lean muscle mass, the muscle atrophy eventually bring down your mitochondria, eventually eliminating these batteries from your cell, and that will eventually reduces your longevity, right? That's why it's very important to make sure you have a plan for your fitness, right? This is my favorite, power nap, right? Sleep is very crucial. In fact, sleep plays a very important role in ensuring a proper cleanup mechanism of mitochondria. It has its exclusive benefits. Ravi covered it beautifully in the last session, right? 20 minutes of power nap helps you fine tune mitochondria. I mean, it's for me, it is like drinking 2 cups of coffee. Every time I take this power nap, I feel so refreshed as if I got up in the morning, right? So you can seriously try it only for 20 minutes, right? If you can figure out a mechanism to take a nap for 20 minutes, it can give you surplus of energy. Trust me, it has worked for me a lot. right? I mean, I lost my mother at the age of 3. Every time I used to write gratitude, I used to say, thank you for bringing me into this world. Now I have one more reason to express gratitude to my mother. Mitochondria is the only DNA that comes from your mother. The rest of the chromosome, right? We split father and mother, right? But mitochondria comes only from your mother, right? When mothers, when mother gives you mitochondria, it's healthy, and it's our responsibility to keep it that way, right? That's all I want to share. Thank you. Back to you, Shani.